Thank you very much indeed. We had the privilege of being in Leuven in the Irish College some time ago, wonderful establishment for many years. I understand that everybody here was in the Guinness Hop store last evening, so calm down. For those from Ireland will know what I mean. For the 300 from international countries, you're very welcome to Dublin, and if you haven't been here before, I hope you get a flavour of the personality of our country and of our people. And I'd like to congratulate the Insurance Ireland for winning the competition to host this international event here. Important as a signal and as a symbol of what it is that we stand for. Your pronunciation is very good. When Her Majesty the Queen of England came here, obviously she spoke in Gaelic, which was a historic thing in many ways, but also symbolic of the new friendship between our two countries. And Taoiseach means, in the old Irish tribal terms, means leader or chieftain. But for those who don't speak Irish on a regular basis, they pronounce it Taoiseach in phonetics. So you did very well. Thanks, Kevin, for the opportunity to be here. Another Insurance Ireland is celebrating its 30th year, so it's fitting that it should be here and in the Doubletree. It's a brilliant venue. For those of you from abroad, this is the 100th year, the centenary year of the 1916 Rising, which occurred halfway between 1940 and 1918, obviously in the Great War, which was a group of revolutionaries who took over the GPO and the General Post Office here in Dublin. Ireland, if you like, from that point took its first fledgling steps towards economic, political and social independence. A very difficult period 100 years ago, because out of that came negotiations with the British Empire, which had sort of colonized Ireland for 500-600 years, which resulted in a civil war in the country here and very difficult economic and personal circumstances for very many people. So we celebrate in an inclusive way, and a very sensitive way, and a very comprehensive way, that centenary and the movement over the next 10 years to what happened in our country here. And just over the last period of 8 to 10 weeks, we've had to work very hard to put a government together, as you rightly mentioned. I sit around the table at the European Council with 27 other leaders, and the rise of populism and the rise of different forms of politics are certainly causing challenges for democracy in all its forms. It's not just confined now to America. We've got a very provocative election, but clearly, countries like Portugal and Spain and Greece and Austria are all having challenges of one sort or another. We've had ours here, and clearly across the water in Britain, the decision to be made on the 23rd of June is probably the most critical decision of the last 50 years in the context of the future of the European Union, the future of Britain, and as a consequence, the future of other countries associated with it, not least of which is our own here. So we were able to put together a different form of government here in Ireland, which is unprecedented. In previous years, you either had single-party government or you had combinations of parties in government. In this sense now, it's a minority government, that you don't have a majority and therefore can't act as a majority government, and that requires far greater consultation, openness, transparency, building on a sense of trust. In other words, to keep the country moving, you need good faith and no surprises, as it were. Ireland's been the fastest growing country in the Union, the OECD, again in 2016 and last year. Obviously, economic statistics are of no comfort to people who feel pressure from distressed mortgages or unemployment or immigration or whatever. 5 years ago, interest rates in Ireland were 15%. The National Treasury Management Agency were able to borrow money 10 days ago at 1/6 of 1%. Unemployment's fallen from 15.2 down to 7.9%. Therefore, employment is rising. And while you're here, when we had a situation where all of the faith was put in the proceeds of a construction sector, which collapsed completely, it's now beginning to revive itself. And in the last 12 months, a further 10,000 employees have been added to the construction sector. So the next period ahead for Ireland is one, if it's managed well in terms of the economy, is one of great optimism and great promise. Believe me, the decisions to be made politically over the last 5 years were very difficult and affected every single person on this island, every household, every family, one way or another. And when you had a hemorrhage of immigration, depressing employment statistics, outrageous interest rates, that it was very difficult to make those decisions, and many thousands of people are still feeling the difficult effects of those issues. But Greece has now come through 7 years of austerity and still face great challenges up ahead. Obviously, a second election coming in Spain. Then you have all of the complexity of the migration and immigration from Syria and the difficulties on the Eastern European countries. So what we want to do here is to manage the economy prudently in the people's interests, to create a further 200,000 jobs by 2020, and to bring down the unemployment rate to 6% over the period ahead. We will have our deficit eliminated entirely by 2018. So in that sense, the movement of the country from an economic perspective has been very significant. The challenge for the government now is to be able to use the fruits of a rising economy to deal with social disadvantage, unfairness, and opportunity for people in the lower levels of income, in the middle income bracket, and give opportunity for that kind of country to rise. So clearly, from your own discussions, you'll appreciate the extent of what the insurance business here means for us, and I'm glad that you're focusing on the customer, because as public representatives, we'll always get queries from people about insurance companies or about the nature of insurance or difficulties that they may have. I'm quite sure that Insurance Ireland and Insurance Europe are interested in giving their customers the very best of service. It was worth over €10.5 billion here in Ireland last year. And insurance companies want to invest in this country because of our distinctive strengths. We've got a very creative, imaginative, young Irish workforce. Talent and skills, attitude and adaptability are second to none. And many of the international studies will show you that whatever the challenge is, young Irish are able to meet that challenge in a variety of forms. So you've got young workforce, well-educated, English-speaking, with a strong legal base, innovative and creative, which I think applies right across every sector, from insurance to engineering to pharma to high-tech to digital financial services, and so on. So you become highly competitive and have a very transparent and upfront corporate tax regime. Obviously, many of our companies here have long experience of what the insurance industry means and how it operates. Many companies choose Ireland because of its research and innovation facilities, and because of the advances that we have made in areas like data analytics, governance, risk and compliance. And because we're a small country, we did not have the resources to do all of these things together, so we prioritized a number of these and specialized to a great extent, which I think adds an extra attraction in those particular areas. So Ireland has targeted international financial services here for the last 30 years. Just on the Docklands down here, where the international financial services began 30 years ago with a very small number of employees, now got over 40,000 and is in a thriving hub. And not only that, but those services and those jobs are now being translated to other regions of the country where they can do their business as well. Obviously, we've set out a program for the next 5 years to develop this strategy and to grow the sector. And what we want to do is to position Ireland as a leading player in the global financial services area. And we think we can do that to a very satisfactory degree. In 2015 alone, There was a 7.4% growth in the sector, and I would like to acknowledge the positive contribution that the industry representative in the sectors, including Insurance Ireland, have helped to make that strategy stronger and to improve. And I'd also like to say publicly here that we acknowledge the very useful contribution that Euro officials have made in respect of the Solvency II directive, which came into force on the 1st of January 2016, which obviously is of interest to everybody. So this new framework should improve risk management, encourage the development of more sustainable business models, and deliver, if you like, a more consistent supervisory approach across member states with the key aim of increasing consumer protection, which is why when people have confidence and faith in the industry, they will want to invest and participate. Let me just say something in conclusion here about the decision to be made by the British electorate on the 23rd of June. We are Britain's closest neighbour, and they ours, and we've got a very close relationship now. We've signed a memorandum of understanding with the Prime Minister in Downing Street a number of years ago, and that sets out a range of areas that both countries wish to work on. Now, this decision is one that normally you would leave entirely to the electorates themselves because it's a referendum. In this country here, we have voted in referenda on European questions on many occasions over the last 40 years. The Maastricht Treaty, the Amsterdam Treaty, the Nice Treaty, the Lisbon Treaty. So in our case, in Ireland's case, people are very clear about the triangle of power, if you like, between the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the European Council. And the Parliament has grown in importance over the last decade, which now has co-responsibility for many issues with the European Council. And that hasn't been the same way in Britain, where they haven't had the same number of referenda, and therefore are not as used to voting on European issues as we are here, and I say that with the greatest of respect. But this is a matter of decision for the British electorate, and that includes Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. It also includes 1 million people from Ireland who live in Britain, who have the right to vote in this referendum. And our focus as the Irish government is to talk to those Irish communities who are involved in employment in Britain, to say to them that it's very important that they be registered by the 7th of June and that they vote on the 23rd of June. Now, there's 1.2 billion in trade every week over and back across the Irish Sea. It sustains 200,000 jobs here and a further 200,000 jobs in Britain. So it's not an issue that should be taken lightly or that should be treated as if it's just another political issue. This is probably the most critical decision of the last 50 years in respect of the European Union. We believe that the European Union is much stronger having a Britain that's central focus to that. And we say that for very good reasons. But also, since 1922, Ireland has had a common travel area with Britain. But we've had that in operation when we were both outside the European Union and now that we're both inside the European Union. Were that to change and were the British electorate to decide to leave Europe, clearly the negotiations that would follow would be impacted by that position, because you wouldn't have a situation where people coming through to Ireland from Europe would then be able to travel freely as we do to Britain now. And obviously, with Northern Ireland as part of the island of Ireland here, the question of whether you'd have customs controls or border controls returning when they've been removed for many years would be an issue that would be complicated. And clearly the people in Scotland, by and large, appear to be going to vote yes. Obviously difference in some polls in Wales, but clearly in England itself, which is critical here, it's a tight situation. The polls in the recent days would indicate a strengthening of the position to stay as a member of the European Union. But it's not for me to pronounce with any degree of certainty on that. But there are 4 good reasons why we want Britain to stay as a member of the European Union. The first is for Europe itself. Europe needs to be able to renew itself. There are political challenges arising in all the countries. You can't have a situation where very significant numbers of young people, up to 50% in some countries, are unemployed and have nothing to do and have no hope and no inspiration and become frustrated and angry, and it leads to right and left radicalism. And if the centre is all hollowed out, you can see the difficulties yourself that arise. So Europe has got to be able to deliver politically in reforming itself, to provide opportunities, to create new jobs, grow economies, and give people a chance to live their lives. Secondly, for the sake of Northern Ireland, Northern Ireland is a region that is still emerging from the consequences of 30 years of serious conflict and terrorism. There is $3 billion on the table between here and 2020 for the peace negotiations and the interregional funds from Europe, channeled for particular categories of communities in Northern Ireland where there are sensitivities and difficulties. And we want Northern Ireland to achieve its full economic and social potential. Just this very day, following the recent Assembly elections, the parties hope to put together the Assembly to be able to implement the governance responsibilities that they have that were devolved from the British government to Northern Ireland a number of years ago. Thirdly, we want the strong bonds between Britain and Ireland to be preserved, and that includes the common travel area, which has been there since 22 and which is of great benefit in terms of trade and hospitality and tourism and the normal travel that people have with their families and their friends. And fourthly, for the sake of sustaining our mutual economic growth, as I said, 1.2 billion in trade every week over and back across the Irish Sea. So whatever the people in Britain do, if they decide to stay as a member of the Union, then the benefits and the agreements worked out at the European Council with the British Prime Minister will be implemented immediately. Where they decide to leave the European Union, Ireland will still stay a member of the European Union. Our future is linked with the Euro and the Eurozone. In fact, in the middle of the greatest period of the recession here a number of years ago, we were required to hold a referendum on the Fiscal Stability Treaty. And while it's normal for electorates to give governments a good kicking in referenda, the people here in Ireland voted 60-40 in favour of that Fiscal Stability Treaty. So that's where our future is. So we've got two benefits, if you like. One of being a member of the Union, of the 500 million single market, and secondly as the closest neighbour of Britain, where we do that extent of trade every week. So we're actually going to send over some of our ministers from government to speak to Irish communities, to talk to where cities, city councils or chambers of commerce have Irish connections, and to talk to them about the importance of voting here. But as in all countries, we don't like people coming in here telling us what to do, and we don't want to be seen to go over and tell the British people what to do either. But because of our unique connections, we feel it important and imperative that we go and talk to our own citizens who live and work in Britain, and that's where we can find our remarks to. So in that sense, we continue to be a co-guarantor of the peace agreements and are great friends with the British people, and we express the hope that they will vote yes on the 23rd of June to stay as a member of the European Union for the future. And that's, if you like, part of promoting this country as a serious place that you can believe in, that your industry can invest in, both domestic and international, and it also sets out where we see a potential for future growth. I know that from Insurance Ireland's point of view, you're negotiating and talking to government about issues of insurance in terms of the motor industry, in terms of the consequences of a very bad weather last year, which has led to a lot of flooding and therefore insurance damage and claims from businesses and domestic dwellings. And these are things that we need to talk about and work on in the best way possible. So I hope that you have a wonderful stay here in Ireland, that you leave with very happy memories, and that you conclude good business with the industry on behalf of your customers. Government is like industry. We have customers too. And in our case, if the customers don't like you, they say, good luck. Thanks very much indeed.